All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig and a Pickle Krug Show with a little 49er video. Stephen A. Smith is not happy that Steve Wilks is out, and we'll let you hear about it next, and we'll comment as well. And, of course, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Get the brisket chili. Go say hi to Damon and Mary. Tell them that Larry Krueger sent you. All right, and we are also brought to you by Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles. They're at 205 Cypress Avenue in Pacific Grove, California. Call Anthony Catania. He's at 831-521-5264. We're also brought to you by ValleyHillRoofing.net, 209-481-6851. Their website links are in the description. Stephen A. Smith went on ESPN on First Take. He's not happy that the 49ers got rid of Steve Wilks. We'll play you that right here. Here's Stephen A. earlier today talking about Wilks.
I'm going to say this. I think it should be a bad look. I'm disgusted. And my heart goes out to my brother Steve Wilks because he keeps getting screwed over time and time again. Arizona, Carolina, here he is in San Francisco. You're there for your first year, 1 year. You have the top 3 ranked defense in the National Football League. Okay? Then you get to the postseason, and I get the struggles. He was going against Jordan Love. He was going up against the Detroit Lions team that's loaded offensively, and they came back from a huge deficit and won that NFC Championship game. And correct me if I'm wrong, Woody, even though Patrick Mahomes went down the field, game-time field goal, overtime, game-winning touchdown, I think that San Francisco's defense played pretty damn well. I don't think anybody would deny that collectively over the course of those 60 minutes plus for the Super Bowl, you expected Kansas City's offense to look a little bit better than it did, but Steve Wilks' defense had something to do with them negating that. Here's my whole point. When you are a leader, you have the right to look at your personnel and say, I think we need to go in a different direction. So I'm not trying to fault Shanahan for that. I'm just sick and tired of folks getting certain chances that other people don't get. Kyle Shanahan has been an offensive coordinator in 3 Super Bowls. All 3, he's had double-digit leads. All 3, he's lost. Now, one was as the offensive coordinator. Why do I hold him accountable for that? Because you were up 28-3. You were up 25 points. And what you needed to do was primarily run the football, not throw the football, so Matt Ryan wouldn't be throwing incomplete passes that would stop the clock and give Tom Brady and those boys more bites at the apple. You didn't do it. You became a head coach. Years later, you got a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter. You get outscored 21-0 by Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. Steve Wilks wasn't your defensive coordinator then, okay? But somebody else is gone, but you still there. Now we fast forward to a few years later, and then once again, you got a double-digit lead in the Super Bowl, okay? You've got a team that spent 57-plus minutes holding the Kansas City Chiefs to under 20 points, and you still can't win the game, but Steve Wilks is out of a job, but you keep yours. And you're like, I think we need to modify, and I think we need to do things better. How about you need to be better, Kyle Shanahan? How about you need to be better? How about firing yourself? And I'm not advocating that you do, because I think he's a hell of a coach. I think Kyle Shanahan is a great coach and a great football mind.
All right, there you go. There's a little Stephen A. Smith. And, you know, it's interesting. He's like, I'm disgusted, and I feel bad for my guy Wilks. And it's like, I mean, people lose their jobs all the time. It's just, you know, you work for the head coach. The head coach gets to decide if you did a good enough job or not. And I don't think it's all on Steve Wilks. I mean, it's not all on Steve Wilks, but it's also Shanahan's prerogative whether or not to replace his defensive coordinator. You know, a lot of this it's not about what happened in the Super Bowl. It's about the fact that the coverage and the back end weren't tied together for basically good portions of the year. There was all kinds of games where the 49ers had a blitz, and yet the coverage was then soft. And then the quarterback would just get rid of the ball quickly to a wide open guy underneath. And just basically there wasn't the front and the back end were not tied together. I mean, that's really, you want to see what's the biggest complaint between the 49er defense? It's that the front and the back end were not tied together. Now, they weren't as good against the run, but to me, that's a personnel thing. I mean, they lost Ebukam, they lost Amenahue, they lost Jimmy Ward, Emmanuel Mosley, Aziz Al-Shair, Hassan Ridgeway. I mean, they lost several really good run defenders, and so they haven't been as good against the run. I do feel bad for Steve from the standpoint he came in, he didn't get to run his own system. He had to run whatever system the Niners had, and he's doing it to the best, of his capabilities. But, Shanahan, it's about trust, and the head coach has got to trust you, and it's pretty clear he didn't trust Steve Wilks. Now, I don't know if it was the Minnesota game where Wilks had the zero coverage blitz at the end of the second quarter, which was a gaffe. I mean, that was a terrible call in that situation. That was a terrible call, and it burned the Niners that night. So I think Shanahan lost some belief in Steve Wilks probably that night right there. Then in the Cincinnati game, the coverage was not in any way tied to the rush. So Burrow just basically picked him apart. So then after the bye, things got a little better. They brought Steve down from the booth to the sideline. But I mean, it's about communicating with your players, and I don't know that Steve was the best communicator across the board. So, do I feel bad for Steve? I do, partly because he still had a top 10 defense as far as total yards. He was still top 5 in points per game allowed. And, there were some struggles here this year, but it's also about fit going forward. And if the head coach doesn't have a trust in you, that's a hard thing to overcome. And then to go into, Shanahan's blown all these leads. I mean, yeah, it's true. But you're like, then Stephen A., say what you want to say. If you're saying that Shanahan should be fired, then say Shanahan should be fired. It's like he just wants to bitch and moan about Shanahan's lost close games, but then he doesn't want to say he should be fired. And he doesn't want to say he should be fired because it's crazy talk to fire a guy who, like 5 other college programs and 2 other teams in the NFL would probably fire their coach just to have a chance to hire Shanahan as their coach. So, I mean, he's a highly coveted NFL coach. Has he won the Super Bowl yet? No. Has he made all the perfect decisions? No. Is he made some mistakes along the way? Yes, absolutely. Does he get a little pass happy in some of the biggest moments? Absolutely. And to me, he deserves criticism. But, I mean, you're disgusted that Steve Wilks is out, and you're ripping Shanahan, but you're going to bring up how he blew a 25-point lead as the offensive coordinator. He wasn't even the head coach. To Brady and the Patriots, and then you're going to bring up the fact that he hasn't gotten to the Super Bowl, but then you're just going to stop real short of saying you want him to be fired. So I mean, you did this huge diatribe to say I feel bad for Steve Wilks and I'm disgusted that he was fired and not Shanahan, but then you yourself don't advocate that Shanahan should be fired. You're just mad that Steve Wilks got fired, and anybody but Wilks also deserves to be fired. I mean, the bottom line is Wilks cost them the Minnesota game. They regressed significantly. They were number 1 defense last year. They were like 17th against the run this year. They never really stopped the run. Now, is that on Steve? Is that on the personnel? I put it more on the personnel than Steve, but Steve's the one who has to answer for it. And then, the fact of the matter is when you're having a zero blitz and you're giving up touchdowns to Minnesota, the head coach threw you under the bus. And then it was like, hey, you know what? We've lost our confidence in Steve. I mean, he didn't directly say it, but supposedly he was more involved this week in the Super Bowl preparations leading into this Super Bowl 58 than ever before. And it's probably because he doesn't have that trust in Steve Wilks. So, I mean, Stephen A is entitled to his opinion, and I get it when he says he's disgusted. And I get it when he says, hey, I feel bad for Steve Wilks, because I know if you looked at this just from the Super Bowl perspective, you're like, oh, well, wait, the Niners offense cost them that game more than the defense did. But it wasn't really about that game. It was about the regression of the defense overall, the lack of development of some of the young DBs and young linebackers, the non-tied together nature of the defense from front to back. Something had to change there, and there was some communication breakdown, and just Steve tried to adapt, and he's a good guy, and he'll get another job. He's worked for 25 years. He'll continue to work. But Shanahan had lost faith, and they wanted to go in a different direction. Now, if they go in a different direction and they hire some kid, then I feel really bad for Steve Wilks, and I'm with Stephen A, and I'm disgusted as well. But I don't think they're going to. I think they'll probably bring in somebody who's better, bring in somebody who's more accomplished, bring in somebody who's got a better track record of success. That's just my guess. They might not. Maybe they'll go internally with somebody that's never done it before. And in that case, I'm more in Stephen A's corner of I'm a little disgusted, because I don't think Wilks is the worst, but I also think that he wasn't the right defensive coordinator for this team at this time. And I agree with Shanahan's decision to look for a better alternative here. But at the same time, I do understand if you replace him with a nobody, then it looks terrible. I mean, Steve Wilks has been doing this for 20 years, and they got reasonable results. So if you replace him with just some guy doing it for the first time or some low-level guy, then I understand where Stephen A is coming from, and I'm disgusted. But if they get the kind of caliber of coach that I'm thinking they're after, a Bill Belichick, a Mike Vrabel, a Brandon Staley, somebody who's done the job before, you know what? If they think that's a better fit, then so be it. So, but there you go. Stephen A, not happy, disgusted that the Niners got rid of Steve Wilks. Thanks to all you guys for supporting the Krug Show. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of the Krug Show. Thanks to Sharp Corners, Sports Cards and Collectibles, as well as Valley Hill Roofing.net. And thanks to all you guys for supporting the Krug Show on YouTube.